Homelessness is far above the national average. A new rental that cost about £1,500 a month in 2017 now often tops £2,500 to £2,700. Wages haven't kept pace with prices. You earn more and feel poorer. Shoplifting is up, supermarkets lock basics behind plastic, and everyday life feels like it's inching out of reach. So how did we get here? Back in 2017, the typical rent for a new place was about £1,500 a month. Now, a new tenancy can easily top £2,700, an increase of roughly 80% in just 8 years. And in the middle of one of the worst housing crunches in the city's history, nearly 45% of property purchases in central London are by overseas buyers. For years, London was the dream for young people across the UK, the place for big careers, bigger opportunities, and a fresh start. But many of those perks are drying up. Good jobs are harder to get, and the ones you do land don't stretch as far. Despite the city's wealth, day-to-day life for many is much tougher than it looks. After housing costs, even high earners in London sit among the bottom 5% in the UK for spending power, and wages adjusted for inflation have barely risen since 2008. You earn more, but live worse. When people are squeezed, standards slip. Last year, shoplifting in the capital surged by about 35%, the sharpest rise of any crime. It's now common to see meat, toiletries, cleaning products locked in plastic cases to deter theft. London isn't all doom and gloom. Plenty of people still live decent, even brilliant lives here. But it is a shadow of its former self, and, for many, a sign of Britain's wider decline. So how did we end up here? On average, Londoners spend about 46% of their income on housing, around 50% more than the UK average. 1 in 4 Londoners is considering leaving within the next year because of rent. The roots of this mess go back nearly 100 years to a choice that seemed sensible at the time. In the 1930s, the average London house was about £500, roughly 3 times the average income. There was no housing crisis. The real worry was cities sprawling endlessly into the countryside. So the government drew a line around London, the Green Belt, to protect nature, keep the air cleaner, and stop urban sprawl. Local authorities bought land around the capital and locked it away from development. For a while, it worked. Much of that countryside is still untouched despite massive demand for homes. But the long-term effect was a squeeze. Today, land protected by Greenbelt policies around London is roughly 3 times the size of Greater London itself. The result? There's very little land left where homes are allowed to be built. The capital needs around 52,000 new homes a year, but has typically managed nearer 30,000. It's estimated that over 1 million additional homes would be needed to bring London up to a typical European level of homes per person. The vanishing safety net. In the decades after World War II, Britain built a huge stock of social housing. By the 1960s, about 1 in 3 homes across the UK was publicly owned. That kept prices in check. More supply, less pressure. Then, in the 1980s, the Right to Buy scheme allowed millions of council tenants to buy their homes at big discounts. In some ways, it was a success. Home ownership rose, in London, from around 55% in 1980 to roughly 67% by the early 2000s, and over 300,000 council homes in the capital were sold. For many families, it was life-changing, but councils were largely blocked from using the sales money to build replacements. Over time, the social housing stock withered. Now, around 330,000 households are on London's social housing waiting list, and about 180,000 people live in temporary accommodation. The safety net was sold and never properly rebuilt. Homes as assets, streets without lights. There are nearly 100,000 empty homes across the capital, left unoccupied even as demand soars. It sounds mad, but housing isn't like most goods. People buy homes to live in, but also as safe assets. That means demand can shoot well beyond need. London's price rises have made it a magnet for global money. In the past decade, prices in central London jumped by around 46%. In 2023, roughly 45% of property sales in central areas were to foreign buyers. That inflow has some benefits, but for locals trying to live in the city, it's a killer. Studies suggest that without that investment, average prices could have been around a fifth lower. In short, Londoners are paying the price for other people's portfolios. When services are run for profit. It's not just housing. Everyday life has been shaped by similar choices. Take Thames Water. The city's water supplier was privatized in 1989. Upgrading old pipes and preventing sewage spills is expensive and doesn't deliver quick profits. So for years, investment lagged. Since 2022 alone, Thames Water has missed around 100 planned upgrades to reduce sewage overflows after heavy rain. Meanwhile, since 1990, it has paid out over £7 billion in dividends, much of it funded by debt. That debt now stands at roughly £18 billion, about 80% of the company's value. The company's on the brink, and bills for Londoners are expected to jump by about 30%, the biggest rise since privatization. Ordinary people end up footing the bill to prop up a failing utility. The cost of everything. In the past few years, prices have leapt. Energy bills are the clearest example. Before the pandemic, the average household paid roughly £1,000 a year. Now it's closer to £1,700. London's older housing stock makes things worse. Bills in the capital are often 20 to 30% higher than elsewhere because older homes leak heat. At the same time, a long spell of austerity after 2008 left public services creaking. Public sector debt has climbed from about £500 billion in 2008 to around £2.8 trillion today. With an aging population, the NHS now costs far more than it did back then, well over £100 billion more a year. London's councils face a huge road maintenance backlog, and many schools need major repairs. To plug holes, council tax has risen sharply in some boroughs, and the UK's overall tax burden is now around post-war highs. Freezing tax thresholds has quietly pushed more Londoners into higher tax bands as inflation nudges up wages on paper, even if take-home purchasing power hasn't really improved. Because Londoners typically earn more, they get dragged into paying more, while rent eats the extra. Safety, trust, and getting by. When costs bite, crime tends to rise. Shoplifting in London jumped by roughly 35% last year. Trust in the police is shaky. About half of Londoners say they don't trust the Met. And the most common offenses, violent and sexual offenses, cast a long shadow over daily life. Moving around isn't cheap either. Most cars that don't meet emission standards pay £12.50 a day to enter Greater London under ULEZ. In the centre, there's a £15 daily congestion charge. To be fair, the benefits are real. Nitrogen oxide pollution in central London has fallen by more than half. But for working-class Londoners who can't afford newer cars or have long commutes, those charges bite hard. Meanwhile, real wages have stagnated since the financial crisis. Adjusted for inflation, the average Londoner still earns less than in 2008, around 5% down, depending on the measure. While other advanced countries have seen incomes rise, London also has one of the highest unemployment rates of any UK region, around 6%. Among young people, too many are out of work or education. It's rough. The new London life. Farther, longer, lonelier. The squeeze is pushing middle-income Londoners out to commuter towns beyond the Greenbelt. London now has the longest average commute in the UK, roughly 81 minutes a day. People end up far from family and friends, and loneliness creeps in. About half of Londoners report feeling lonely. With money tight, more people say now is a time to save, not spend, which means fewer meals out, less entertainment, and lower life satisfaction. Public transport itself is pricey. London's fares are among the most expensive in the world, often 1.5 to 2 times the cost of similar global cities. Only about 40% of tube trains have air conditioning, and with summer temperatures regularly topping 30 degrees Celsius, the underground can be sweltering. Air quality is worse below ground too. Tiny particle pollution from rail dust can be many times higher than at street level. Some tube stock dates back to 1972, older than your mum's favorite records. The wider infrastructure tells the same story. Hammersmith Bridge has been closed since 2019 due to safety concerns and may not fully reopen for years, with repair costs heading towards £250 million. Across the city, many bridges are rated in poor condition. In one of the richest countries in the world, that should be unthinkable, but for millions in London, it's just daily life. The stakes. London is an economic powerhouse, generating over £500 billion a year for the UK. But without affordable housing, reliable infrastructure, and a stable cost of living, its long-term edge is at risk. So far, policy hasn't matched the scale of the problem. It's not a question of whether the current path is sustainable. It isn't. The real question is whether we're willing and able to act. Because if London is to be a city for everyone, not just the loaded, we'll need to build more, plan smarter, and put people before speculation. Otherwise, the lights stay on, but the city we love slowly slips away. On the contrary, the UK is in significant debt, running trillions of pounds. So how will these developments be possible? This triggers two big questions. What is Britain's public debt? And how does one of the top 10 richest economies in the world become indebted? This will be answered in our next video.